Yeah, so, the first book I have read from you was The Real Education, or Schule in Aufbruch.
Yes.
Yeah. And you describe several schools all around the world where you traveled and stayed always one week
Yes,
at least.
that's right, yes.
I like the idea, but I am curious how you selected these schools.
Oh, well, it was very interesting actually. When I started, or before I started doing it, I only knew of Summerhill and Dartington, where I had been working, and Sands School, and I didn't know of anywhere else. And I met somebody who told me about Sudbury Valley, and so I wrote to Sudbury Valley, and they said they were coming to Israel for a conference, and I must come too. And so I went with a little group from Sands to join this conference. And after it, because we'd found it was so academic and political, masses of university lecturers and politicians and people were speaking, and Yakov Hecht, who was the head of the Democratic School of Hadera, said we must go to his school and talk about what actually happens.
Okay.
And so we went there and we talked for 2 days, about, I think, 20 or 30 people in the room at most. We talked for about 2 days and enjoyed ourselves so much we decided we must do it again. And I decided that I must visit some more schools, and every school I visited knew of somewhere else. And so so I made a sort of timetable for myself of schools to visit, and I was helped by various different people telling me about these schools, and hardly any of the schools knew about each other at all, except for Summerhill. They'd all heard of Summerhill, but they hadn't heard of anywhere else. And so I thought it was important to help these schools to link together, and that's why I wrote the book. Well, I set out to write the book, to be fair, and I had an extraordinarily good time, and was very kindly looked after everywhere I went. I mean, because going around the world is not necessarily a cheap occupation, but if everywhere you go you are looked after and fed, and then it's not as expensive as it would have been otherwise.
Okay. Yeah, but later on I realized it was not your first book. And the other days I asked you if it was the Considering Children, your first book. I have read it later on because it was freely downloadable from the website.
Yes.
And later on I realized it was already translated to German. This book I liked even more, I must say. I think this book said something what Neil and other theoretic people never said. They said you have to be on the side of the child.
Yes.
But how you stay on the side of the child is not so easy. And from Considering Children I understood the respect or value children, and I always remember the third chapter when you describe how you felt in Dartington Hall. So maybe most of the people who are going on the side of the democratic education do it from books.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
But for you it was different because you have seen the school. Tell me a bit more about Dartington Hall and your first Not only the interview, but a bit afterwards. How you?
Yes. Well, when I got into the school, when I arrived, I was just so pleased not to have to try to impose myself on other people. I'm very bad at imposing myself. And there was one example was when a whole lot of tables, I think, had been moved from somewhere to somewhere else.
Yeah.
And at the boys' school I'd been in before, then someone would have said, you and you, come and move the tables. And I saw a group of children and said, would some of you help move the tables? And they all came. There was no question of imposing anything on them, and they were just friendly and pleasant. When I'd been teaching in a boys' public school before, and what all the masters from the school wanted to know was, what was it like teaching girls? And so I found myself saying, very much to my surprise, that I really didn't know, because in my classes there wasn't any difference. You taught boys and girls the same. And so that was a new insight, which I didn't. It just happened. I didn't have to think about whether I was treating girls differently or anything like that.
Okay, so that was the considering children, yeah. That time already Sans existed when you wrote this book.
No, Sans only started when Dartington Hall School closed.
Okay, because Considering Children appeared in 1990 or... Yeah.
I'm so hopeless at dates, I've no idea.
Okay. So, but anyway...
It must have been earlier than 1990, it must have been...
Earlier?
Yes, 1975 or something. No, 85.
Oh, no, don't.
Yes.
Okay. But after this all years, after the Considering Children, you wrote again several books, but now it comes an ugly question. How would you define democratic education?
Oh yes,
it is an ugly question.
Well, it's no one can do it. I've been at meetings where people have just been discussing what they think democratic education is, and
that and that.
Some of them have. There's a very definite announcement from the Berlin IDEC. You probably remember that.
Yes,
where they said
2005.
Yes, children must have a right to decide what they will learn, when they will learn it, where they will learn it, and with whom they will learn it. And it seems to me impossible, actually. I mean, you couldn't organise a place that ran exactly like that. You can have children learning what they're interested in, and they can decide what to learn and when to learn it, but you can't run a whole big organisation like that, I don't think. Although, to be fair, actually, now I can think of it, there's a big comprehensive school in England, called Countisthorpe College, where the children it's one of the most schools that's impressed me most of all the ones I visited, in a way. It was a great big school, 1,400 children, and they had... every child had a different timetable. So there were lessons, but you chose which lessons to go to, and you had a whole lot of chunks on your timetable which were just empty. And those times were when you were encouraged to find something that interested you and that you wanted to work on. And I was very, very impressed by the sort of things the children had found to learn about and to study. And their enthusiasm about it and their pride in what they'd done. And it was very difficult to believe that it was actually a comprehensive school. So it was a full range of ability. And everybody was involved in some particular aspect of life that they were learning about. There was one girl who was for instance, doing learning all she possibly could about extreme right-wing views, because she wanted to know how to answer them, which seemed marvellously sensible to me. But they were very, very varied. There was a boy who was describing the lives, I don't know if that's quite the right word, was observing the birds in his garden at home, his little garden, and he wrote a whole mass of stuff about that. They were really lovely to talk to the children about what they've been doing and to read what they've been doing. It was really, very good.
So this is also an example that quite normal schools are going to this direction we cannot define. Children-centered or democratic, I don't know.
Yes.
Why it is happening so rarely?
Yes, I find it very disappointing, really. I think people who haven't seen it happening don't believe it. When I was 14 or 15 or something, I read one of Neil's books, and I thought it was just stupid. It can't work. This is nonsense. I think people are particularly in England actually, people are very mistrustful of children. They don't like children in England. Lots of people don't like children. And you see shops or restaurants in particular, where it says no children or dogs. No.
Yeah. When you mentioned Neil, and when I was at the beginning was reading about Summerhill, I thought also that this place should be very anarchic. I would say. And later on I realized that these places are very much organized. So it is not happening everything spontaneous.
Yes.
The place should be organized, but maybe the principles of the organization are different.
Yes. I like the definition of anarchy as order without authority.
Order without authority.
Yes.
So self-organizing.
Yes, I suppose so, yes.
Yeah. Would you say about you that you are an anarchist?
Certainly, to some extent. I expect to the same extent as you're a communist.
Difficult.
Yes,
yeah.
I mean, because I haven't read any anarchist writers, and I've subscribed for a while to an anarchist magazine, and it was just unreadable.
Yeah. When something becomes an ideology, then it is the end. Okay. One other book of you influenced me, or this is the only one I took with me now. This was the Worlds Apart.
Oh yes, right, yes.
In this book you try to describe the differences, the school in the mainstream education and Sands and Summerhill. And I liked it, and that time we started to discuss about authority, and we will not agree. I said there is something natural authority, and you said no authority at all, and then I said competence. And,
yes.
And so you said, yes, maybe there's this one,
yes.
which you can use instead of, and I think it is like this, and I always everywhere, for instance in Summerhill, people say we are a children democracy, and I don't like it. I always edit children and adults.
Yes.
So. What do you think which is better, children democracy or the children and adult democracy, or
It's the children and the adults together, I think, and but not the people who are actually in the school.
yeah.
And that doesn't include the parents. I think it's rather important for secondary school, certainly, that parents are not involved in the running of the school. It's just the staff and the students who decide for themselves. And sometimes it sounds, well, one occasion when I was still there was a school meeting where the children decided they would exclude all the staff. So
What?
there are no teachers, just children having a school meeting. And they had their school meeting and they made their decisions, which were exactly what they would, either what they would have been if there'd been grown-ups there. And the only difference was that instead of taking an hour, it took them about 20 minutes.
It was lasted much shorter.
Much shorter, yes. Because adults tend to talk too much.
Yeah.
And if one adult puts forward a point of view and someone else contradicts it, the first adult says what he said before again.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so I think it was it. And thank
Good,
you
yes.
very much.
Not at all. I enjoyed a very pleasant talk.